The Hyundai Ioniq 5 has arrived in Ireland and I haven't shrunk. This is a massive car. I know in the pictures it looks like a C-segment hatchback, like a Golf or something, but it's much closer in size to something like the Hyundai Santa Fe. Its wheelbase is longer, and in terms of width and length, it's about the same size and a little bit more than the Volkswagen ID4. We'll come back to the design in a minute, but I want to talk you through the Irish range first, because it's quite a wide range actually. There's two different battery packs to choose from, a 58 kilowatt hour, which gets you a range of about 384 kilometers, and a 73 kilowatt hour battery, and that goes up to 481 kilometers, officially anyway. The range starts at about 38,000 and it rises up to 65,000 euro, which sounds like a lot of money, but that's for the biggest battery pack, the highest specification, and all-wheel drive actually, so that's got more power. All of the Ioniq 5s are very well equipped. Other than the base model, you get a heat pump standard, which is very impressive. You get dual zone climate control, rear parking camera, and lots more. It's a really well equipped car for the price. Now about that design. Start at the front, and it's quite bluff front end, isn't it? And quite a slender light section here, but it really stands out because of these rectangular LED front lights. They look amazing. Also on the front, if you look a bit closer, the Hyundai badge is huge. It's really wide, and that helps disguise the size of the car. Now, around the sides, you've got really unusual wheel arch feature here. It's kind of slanted, and it ties in with the larger alloy wheel design actually on one side, which is unusual. And we think it probably looks a bit better with lighter colours. Not so sure with the black paintwork here. Still unusual, still worth talking about. Same with these side sills here. They're straight, they contrast against the black. It's very cutting edge design. What it'll be like in 5 years, we don't know. These door handles are slim fitting, so when the car is moving or when it's locked, they're in and they pop out. It's a nice little feature. And as you move back, unusually for a car that some will think it might be like an SUV, you have a sloping rear window, which makes it look like a hatchback. Something that owners really appreciate around the side is the action of the charge port. Push here and up it lifts smoothly electrically. It's a very nice feature. You can get an adapter actually for this, where you can charge up a laptop or whatever, which is an unusual feature. Press a button and then it closes. That's not the only thing to see at the back. These rear lights are just as interesting as those at the front. They've got this rectangular little signature, which is just stunning to look at. Straight off, again, a motor show stand. The back of the car, otherwise, is fairly conventional. Obviously, you've no exhaust pipes, and so Hyundai has instead put this silver grey section at the bottom, which offers some contrast. Despite the sloping hatch, Hyundai says there's 527 litres of boot space under here, which is a useful amount. You get a big buggy under there, no problem. There is a little bit of extra space under the floor here, which you think, oh, that would be useful for the cables. But actually, this car's got a frunk, as they call it. So there's over 50 litres of space under the front bonnet, and that will easily hold cables. The interior of the Ioniq 5 is spectacular. Now, some people will think Hyundai and not think luxury, but there's nothing other than luxurious about this car. The quality is insane. It's really, really good. There's a couple of tiny hard plastics here and there, but really, in general, it's very good. Lovely leather, very soft leathers in the seats as well, and just the switchgear is just top notch. Hyundai has really raised its game for this car. All that might be enough for us to recommend it, but look at the design too. It's a league above almost everything else at this kind of price range, isn't it? It's got two lovely screens here, and they're large. This is standard, incidentally, these big screens. And Hyundai and Kia have been at the forefront of touchscreen menus in recent years, so it's all intuitive to use, it's all simple to use. There are lovely physical buttons here, which we like, with shortcuts to different items, and the climate control is actually lower down. I do find the steering wheel a little bit odd, this two-spoke thing, but Skoda does a similar thing. This one's a bit featureless actually. Surprisingly, it doesn't have any branding on it. It does have the drive mode button here, so you can go eco, sport, normal, or actually if you hold it down you get winter mode as well, which could be useful. And these lovely tactile buttons on the wheel. Everything works very well. The drive controller is a bit unusual. It's down here to the right, it's like a wand, and you twist it to put it into drive, neutral, reverse or park. It's not unlike what we're seeing in other electric cars actually. You soon get used to it. Everything else is very traditional really in terms of the controls, but the design, as I said, is what stands out. Now, in terms of space, as you can probably see, I can stretch out here. I'm not particularly tall, but there's loads of space for tall people too. You know, you can put this all the way back and there's still room in the back. This center console actually slides back and forth, which is a neat little feature. So there's a walk-through section here. Not quite sure why you'd want to walk through to your passenger, but there you go. And you can bring it forward and back as you want. There's wireless chargers standard down here for smartphones. There's loads of USB ports everywhere, and there's just a lot of storage space. Now, the door pockets are big. There is extra storage. The glove box is worth pointing out. The glove box slides. It's a drawer. Now, I've mentioned elsewhere that the action of that sliding could be a bit nicer, but it's very, very practical. It is a big space in there. Better go look at the back though. If this is being considered for a family car, is it big enough for a family? I'm not going to commit to saying whether it's a family car or not. I think different families will have to try it out for themselves. I will say that there's a lot of space back here. The long wheelbase I mentioned earlier does mean a lot of legroom. Now, this is me sitting behind my own driving position, and I can push my feet in underneath the seat, and look how much knee room I have. Absolutely loads. It's decently wide too, though I'm not convinced you'll get many car seats across the back here. I don't think you'll get 3 back here very easily at all. In fact, I don't think it's better than the ID4 in that way. It's decent headroom though. Nice visibility as well. You feel like you're raised up a little bit because the battery's under the floor in this car. And of course the quality, like I mentioned earlier, is phenomenal. On top of that, there are USB ports, some extra storage here, and people in the back get their own air vents as well. The rear seating adjusts as well actually for passenger space or boot space, depending on what you need. These 2 seats here adjust as one, and this is a single seat, so it can slide back and forth, and it can actually adjust the backrest angle as well for comfort, which is quite nice. If you want to read a detailed review of the Ioniq 5 and all about its rival electric cars, make sure you go to CompleteCar.ie website. Meanwhile, make sure you press the subscribe button down below. Out on the road, it doesn't really feel like an SUV. It feels like a car. A big car, sure. Doesn't feel excessively big on the road. A lot of people have been asking us on social media what it's like to park and everything, but it doesn't feel big. We haven't tried it in a multi-story car park yet, so maybe it'll be a challenge there. Now, you do get a little bit more ground clearance, like I said, and you still a bit higher because the battery is underneath the floor here, but it still doesn't feel like a proper SUV, and it certainly doesn't drive like one. The suspension is a little bit firm, perhaps, so I'd recommend that if you live in an area where the roads aren't great, perhaps don't upgrade to the 20-inch wheels. We're on 19-inch wheels here, and it's comfortable, it's good, but I wouldn't want it to be any firmer. So it's not a magic carpet ride, if you like. It's very smooth on the motorway in particular. At higher speeds it's really good, but you notice it on the country roads here, little bumps. There's a little bit of jiggliness through the suspension perhaps that would probably be worsened by the bigger wheels. This isn't a particularly powerful car. The rear-mounted electric motor produces the equivalent of 170 horsepower. It doesn't sound like much, but it's a bit lighter than the likes of the ID4, so it's a similar performance. And it doesn't feel lacking, especially, obviously you've got the instantaneous torque that you always get with electric cars, low down, so in town and everything it feels fast, it feels nippy. And out on the open road it doesn't feel lacking either. So it's more than adequate, in effect. The very top model with 4-wheel drive gets more power, but most people will be quite happy with this one. Now, that motor, as I said, is rear mounted, so this car is actually rear wheel drive. And enthusiasts who perhaps buy it for its design and not necessarily its family carrying ability will be happy to hear that it's really good to drive. It feels like a rear wheel drive car. It's got a lot of traction when the traction control and everything is turned on, but it's agile, it's engaging. The steering is good for an electric car's steering in particular, and it's actually quite an enjoyable car to drive. For most people, they'll care more about the fact that it's lovely and smooth, it's quiet. You can just about hear the electric motor whine sometimes. It's not very loud by any measure for any electric car. And it's a smooth, comfortable experience. What is really good is the wind suppression and tire noise suppression. It's quiet, it's a comfortable car, and actually it begins to feel a bit like a luxury car, to be honest, which is enhanced by this high quality interior we mentioned earlier. In terms of range, we told you the official figures earlier, and they seem achievable around town or at slower speeds for sure. I mean, Hyundai and Kia are good at the battery technology and getting good range out of the battery, and that's been shown. In the real world, they have decent efficiency, and that seems to be repeated here. Now, today probably isn't representative. We're up in the mountains, we're doing the videoing. It's averaging 21 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which is only okay. If it averaged that all the time, you won't get over 350 kilometers range out of this car. Now, in terms of range, we haven't had a chance yet to do a really long drive, but the efficiency that it's showing at the moment it's averaging 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which isn't good enough to get the 380 kilometer range from this 58 kilowatt hour battery that we're driving today. But if you're driving around town a bit more efficiently than we are, we're up in the mountains, up and down hills, then you perhaps will do a lot better than that. There is an eco mode, which of course will eke out a bit more range out of each bit of electron. And then of course there's normal mode it always defaults to, and sport mode. That gives it a bit more response, a bit more heft to the steering, it changes the instruments a little bit. But most people will leave it at normal, I think, realistically. If you want to get the maximum from the battery, then you go for eco. Now, obviously if you need the absolute maximum from your battery, then you probably go for the 73 kilowatt hour battery anyway. One thing that comes to mind when you're driving it is the visibility actually. You're relatively close to this windscreen, which is relatively upright, and it gives you a wonderful view out. These pillars aren't too sloped, so it means there's not much of a blind spot at the front, and the view all around, because of the upright styling, is actually really good. So even though it's a big car, there's great visibility, which is good for around town and spotting cyclists and pedestrians, etc. We're really looking forward to trying that all-wheel drive model actually, because a bit more power. This chassis feels like it could easily deal with a little bit more power and be even more fun to drive. Overall, it is a fun to drive electric car that also doubles up as a pretty decent, comfortable family car. You'd be very happy driving it down the motorway as much as you would just driving around town. So that's our first look at the Hyundai Ioniq 5 on Irish roads. It's a very interesting car, isn't it? Whether people will go for the design, whether they'll think, maybe this is better than an SUV. It doesn't look like an SUV, but it's as big as one. It's a spacious one. The quality is absolutely great. The design is really interesting. Some people mightn't like it. Can it compete against the likes of the Volkswagen ID4, Skoda Enyaq? Possibly. It's very well priced. It's very well spec'd. And Hyundai, I think, will be hoping to steal some sales from the likes of Tesla, the likes of Audi and Volvo as well. So there's a lot to come. Next year, we'll get proper supply. Until then, supply will be a bit low, and that could be the biggest issue, the limiting factor. No matter what, it's a very interesting electric car.